A positive mental outlook does not mean pretending that it's small or doesn't exist, but it's putting the comma in every sentence. This is a really difficult situation, comma. This is how we're going to move forward.
Followers do not need a leader who is unrealistically cheerful or what I referred to as terminally optimistic. They need to hear things like, this is hard. I know that, but I believe in this team. I believe we can adapt. I believe we can move through this with integrity and strength. It's that kind of confidence that's contagious. Welcome to Science of Leadership, where we explore leadership both practically and scientifically. What makes great leadership, why these things matter, and how we can do them well. Those are the questions we wrestle with through thoughtful discussions and real-world stories. I'm Tom Collins. I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Hamrick, and we're delighted to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. There's a lot of negative going on in the world right now, and that affects us, those we lead, and what we're doing. So today we're talking about something that becomes especially important when circumstances are hard, uncertainty is high, and pressure is mounting. That's the ability to maintain a positive mental outlook in the face of adversity.
I think this is an important thing we're going to be talking about, and I think it'll be really helpful in how we distinguish it from other things. This is not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's not about a forced positivity, some superficial or fake optimism, or even denying that the circumstances are hard or maybe even dangerous. Rather, it's about whether a leader can maintain a grounded, hopeful, optimistic, forward-looking perspective for his team that can get the team steady enough to keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's because when adversity hits, people don't just watch what the leader does. We've talked about this before. They watch how the leader interprets reality, how the leader behaves. They watch whether the leader collapses into fear, bitterness, and defeatism, or in that moment, whether the leader acknowledges difficulty while still conveying belief, direction, and purpose. And that matters. It matters deeply. So in this episode, we're going to be examining why a positive mental outlook is nowhere near a soft extra in leadership, but rather is an imperative performance variable. We'll talk about what it is, why it matters psychologically and organizationally, what science says about optimism and resilience, and how leaders can build a mindset that steadies others when conditions are difficult.
Tom, I think it's great to sort of define what we're talking about, especially with this. It seems like there's so much negative out there, social media, politics, you name it, more and more every day. And as leaders, we have to lead in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of difficult situations. I imagine some of our listeners are hearing this and just thinking about sort of a person that's just blissfully ignorant. Their head in the sand. They're positive because they're ignoring the facts. And that's not really what we're talking about. It's understanding the facts, understanding the situation, but not some blissful outlook, but a positive mental outlook. So, and that's what we're really advocating for in our leaders. So let's define our terms. What are you really talking about? What's the picture you're going to paint for us when we're talking about a positive mental attitude?
Justin, you're right. In today's world, with all the dumpster fires that have been set by various people.
It's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, it could be easy to view our topic today in that way, where it's sort of blissful ignorance or naivety. But yeah, let's be clear on what we're talking about here. When we say a leader needs a positive mental outlook in adversity, we're not meaning that the leader should become detached from reality. We aren't advocating for false reassurance. We don't mean saying everything will work out when there is no evidence for that. That's lying at the end of the day.
We see some of that in medicine where a patient's obviously not doing poorly or doing poorly. Everyone knows it. And somebody's like, oh, it's going to be okay.
Right. Right. Denial in the real sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a denial. And so the idea of maintaining a positive mental outlook in the face of adversity is this: the leader chooses to see the possibility in adversity rather than to see defeat or helplessness. A positive mental outlook says, hey, this is hard, but it's not hopeless. This is painful, but we can still manage it. This may not be the present we wanted, but there is still a future we can shape. We may not control all the situation, but we do control how we respond to it.
That's a huge point, because a lot of times the leaders may not have control of the situation or the circumstances or even the task of what the team is doing. But the leaders can create meaning. They can create the situation. Even when they're not speaking, they are signaling their emotional tone, their framing, their posture, how they're reacting, whether it's either a positive reaction or a negative reaction. The tone of the team is going to be set in large part by the leader. They're going to be telling the story that others are going to tell. So I think that's a huge thing to distinguish of what leaders are capable of and to understand what is happening.
You're 100% right, Justin. As leaders, we set the tone. People are looking to us. They want to see What's the direction we're heading? What is our mental framing? So everybody can see that and they can follow it. And that can be for good or bad. We can set the positive, we can set the negative. If the leader communicates despair, the group absorbs that despair. If the leader communicates panic, it's going to be bedlam. The group magnifies it. If the leader communicates steadiness and a grounded sense of hope, then the group becomes more capable of enduring difficulty without fragmenting.
I think that's another huge distinction. It's important to point to sort of that we're not asking leaders to be oblivious, not to stick their head in the sand and just be like, everything's going to be all right, and not address the concerns, but more to look at the task in front of them and realize the possibilities, to not sort of get into the trap of it's hopeless. You're right, it's hopeless. Let's just give up. But to be stranded on that desert island and to look like all hope is lost and to say, all right, task one, let's secure water. How are we going to do that? And to just allow the team, give the team a system and attitude to really move forward. I'm thinking of a bunch of examples, but Tom, do you have a good example of where you've experienced this, where there could have been two reactions to a situation and the leader, either yourself or someone else, because of their attitude, because of the mentality, really took a fork in the road that allowed the team to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of them, and I'd be interested to hear yours too. But one, as I was thinking about our conversation, one came to mind that was from 20 years ago, back when I was in training. So this is a medical example for folks. So I was in training, and before I did my pediatric cardiology training, I did a combination of internal medicine and pediatrics as my residency. And so in the medicine side, on the adult side, basically taking care of adults, it's easy to see people at the end of life and say, look, this is a hopeless situation, and that legitimately be a hopeless situation. In pediatrics, it's different. A lot of times kids bounce back from things that are just incomprehensible sometimes, but I didn't have that frame. And so as a first-year fellow training in pediatric cardiology, I was on call in the cardiac ICU, and this patient came in who had had a cardiac arrest in the ambulance coming to the hospital because she had felt ill. And they brought the patient up to the ICU, and I did the echocardiogram, and the heart was literally not moving. The patient had been, at that point, put on what's called ECMO. It's a machine that takes over oxygenation of the blood and pumping the blood through the body and so forth, basically takes over the function of the lungs and the heart. It is the most intense thing that we do in all of medicine to keep someone alive. So here's this heart that literally is not moving, that has no electrical activity on the monitor, for all intents and purposes, dead from that standpoint. And it was, in my mind, a hopeless situation. There's no, like, what are we doing here? Parents at the bedside. It's the middle of the night. This is, it's just a terrible scene. And the ICU attending said, we can turn this around. This can get better. And for the world, I didn't see it. I was just like, this person's insane. There's no coming back from this, right? And every single day I would go and the monitor would, nothing, and the heart wouldn't be moving. We were still flowing on the ECMO machine, and the parents, mom's still at the bedside. And the attending kept saying, this can get better. Let's keep doing what we're doing. This can get better. And on day 6, the monitor changed. It started showing boop, boop, electrical activity. The heart still wasn't moving, but it wasn't dead. And over the period of 24, 48 hours, that electrical activity increased and my echocardiogram changed and that heart started squeezing again. And a month later, that patient walked out of the hospital, and I ended up following that patient for 3 more years while I was still in training. And it was incredible, but because of the positive mental outlook, it was not Pollyanna. It was not naivety on the part of that person, that attending. That person knew that this could happen, knew that we had to do what we can, the best of our ability. Okay, we couldn't just sit back and let it, we had to do the best that we could do. And in the midst of what I saw as completely insalvageable, maintain that bearing. And we all said, okay, if you think that this is possible. And in the end, it was absolutely possible. And it changed the life of that patient, changed the life of that family. It changed my life. It changed what I believe is possible. It changed me as a person. And it helped me to offload some cynicism that I was in desperate need of offloading, to be honest with you. So that's an example from my medical career of what this can look like.
There's a lot of points that come up in the story and example you gave that I think are extremely important to address. One is the positive mental outlook of the team leader dictated everyone else's. And it was not one that ignored the circumstances. My guess is every day on rounds, it was like, we have a job to do. We're going to do this, 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 this. And it allowed the team to move forward because there was still vision of the goal. I think if it was like, this is pointless,
Right.
what are we doing? I think the focus of the team just wouldn't have been there. It would have been sort of wandering in the desert versus, as you're telling that story, and I wasn't there, but I imagine it was, guys, I see the goal, I see the vision. And with that one person able to see the goal and the vision, everyone else on the team could. And everyone else was able to remain focused, motivated to this. They're like, hey, our leader says this is this. And that goes a long way because I do think that removes cynicism from others when others sort of buy into that vision. But it was not blind optimism. We're not just throwing up our hand and saying, it's going to be okay. Everything will be fine. And ignoring the desperation of the situation of like, guys, this is hard. It's sort of like a survival situation on an island. Like, you don't just sit on the beach and like, well, we'll get rescued. It's like, hey, guys, we're fending for our lives, but we can get out of this. And this is how we're going to do it. The positive mental attitude seems to always come with a plan, always something that sort of ties in of the positive mental attitude allows the leader to see the vision, to see the finish line, but it doesn't have them ignore the path, and that's what I think is so important in the story that you said. So let's dig a little deeper into why. Why is it important? I mean, obviously it's nice to have. It's nice to go into a room where you're going to have a really hard day and people has a positive mental attitude. I mean, that's nice. But for a leader, is it needed? Like, do you really need it? Like, do you have to? Or is it okay? I'm just a cynical person. I'm not positive. I'm not an optimist. Like, what about the person out there saying that? Like, is it really necessary for leaders to maintain a positive mental outlook?
I would say absolutely imperative. We could argue that point in the sense that it depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
If you're trying to accomplish mediocrity, if you're trying to impede your team from achieving,
I don't think that's on anybody's vision statement.
Yeah,
we want to achieve exceptional mediocrity.
Right. That I think then sure you don't need that positive mental outlook, right? But if you're trying to do great things, if you're trying to achieve what your team is capable of achieving, then you absolutely, in adversity, have to have a positive mental outlook because adversity, from a psychological standpoint, adversity creates what's referred to as cognitive narrowing. So we have a certain amount of cognitive energy that we can give to a set of things. As humans, when we're threatened, we become preoccupied with that threat, right? If I come in and stand over you with a butcher knife, you're not going to be thinking so much about the beautiful song of the blue jay outside your window, right? Like, you're not going to be in that space where you're, imagining great things and coming up with great ideas. You're thinking, how can I not die right now? Right? So that cognitive narrowing shrinks our imagination, our creativity. We become more reactive. We're more self-protective. We divert our energies to ourselves, away from those we're trying to collaborate with. It's just survival mode at that point. And so that means that adversity places a special burden on the leader. In those moments, the leader has to become a stabilizing force, not because the leader is unaffected or because the leader feels no fear, but because leadership often means maintaining hope when others are struggling to hold on to it.
I think that's a huge point and sometimes even difficult to do. And I think why you use the word burden, I think we should really emphasize, because there's a burden of leadership, and this is one of them. You may be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is a terrible situation. But like in medicine, say you're in a room and you're the leader and the patient codes, the patient's heart stops. You may be thinking to yourself, this is a terrible situation, and you're starting to process it and everything. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to focus on the patient outside of themselves and get the job done. And a lot of that is sort of removing yourself from the weight of the adversity of the situation and doing what needs to be done. Be like, let's go forward. Let's go. And that's a huge, huge thing, because you sometimes have to put acceptable negative emotions on the back burner. I'm going to deal with this at another point. I'm going to deal with it. I'm not going to ignore it, but I've got a job to do and I need to do that for my team. It sort of goes back to you care more about the success of your team than you do yourself. Like, in that, even at that point, like, you're sort of putting your own justifiable sort of innate emotional reaction on the back burner and being like,
Yes. What do they
okay,
need as opposed to what do I need?
yep. The team needs a leader. The team needs to move forward. Like, I mean, there's so many examples in history of people just paralyzed with fear and somebody stepping forward and being like, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to move forward, and allowing the team to move forward because someone saw a path forward. Someone maintained that positive mental outlook. I mean, and it really is a burden, and it is honestly a skill, like, and a skill that I'm probably going to get into that needs to be honed and practiced and done. So I
Yeah.
really didn't want our listeners to miss that key, that it is a burden. This is not easy. Like, oh, stay positive, stay optimistic. That's not the situation. Innately is sometimes going to automatically want cynicism to come up. It just will, especially if it's the mood of everyone around. But it is the job, the task of the leader to maintain that positive outlook, not for themselves, but as you point out, for the team to not have that narrowing cognitive function.
Yeah. Let me pause here for a second and remind our listeners that my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and essentially all online outlets. It's getting rave reviews, and I'm certain you will find it not only informative, but also inspiring. So I hope you'll order your copy today. Now let's get back to this interesting conversation. If we look at it, there are at least, 4 things that a positive mental outlook can do for us. First, it preserves our agency. If people believe the situation is hopeless, effort drops. I mean, why try?
Yeah.
If it's hopeless, there's no point
Exactly.
in trying, right? But if they believe that their action still matters and that they have a chance to change the outcome, then those folks will remain engaged. So that's the first thing.
I mean, how many times have you seen, like, Little League kids are down by 15 runs going into the 9th, and they don't run out the play to first. Then maybe they've never seen it, but the coach has probably seen somebody come back from 15 runs. So they're, guys, we got to do this,
Yeah.
and that you're right. Like, if you feel like there's no way you're going to quote unquote win, I don't mean to use that term with all teams, but like, if you don't feel like you're going to win, then why try? Why am I even trying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets to the second thing. The positive thing is that it protects morale, and by morale, I mean, I don't mean like this sort of frivolous, yay, whatever, but a deep sense of shared willingness to keep going. We could call that camaraderie. We could call it esprit de corps. Call it unity to keep up the fight or whatever. But it empowers that. It protects that morale. The third thing is that a positive mental outlook improves decision making, and this gets back to that cognitive narrowing. If we're expending all of our energy against the threat, maintain survival, then our decision making falls away. When we're overcome by negativity, we tend to become rigid. We become impulsive because, again, our sympathetic nervous system, for those who are listening who aren't necessarily in the medical field, that's fight, flight, or freeze. I'm sorry. That sympathetic nervous system's revved up, so we become rigid, impulsive, and avoidant. Try to stay away from it. A leader with a constructive, positive outlook creates the emotional space for better judgment. And you need the best judgment possible when you're in those adverse circumstances. That just sort of makes sense. And then finally, a positive mental outlook transmits courage. Courage is, let's say, psychologically contagious. It's reinforced. When people see someone who's composed, someone who has hope, we borrow strength from that. You can think back to Churchill. I mean, England was in bad shape, right? And he just kept saying, we're going to fight on the land, we'll fight in the sea, and we'll fight in the sky. We're never giving up, because we're British or whatever. And the people said, hey, that guy's right. When all numbers and all calculus would say the Germans got your lunch, dude, Churchill kept that outlook, and that was contagious. And again, it wasn't Pollyanna. It wasn't nonsense in that regard. And so when we think about it as leaders, that positive mental outlook is really an operational strength. It brings together people. It holds together people when adversity is, terrible. I think about one of my favorite movies, okay, is Gladiator. And when the first time that, Maximus goes into the Colosseum with this group of these enslaved folks, and he says, "Stay together." They're going out there to get slaughtered, and they know it.
That's their job.
Right.
Yep.
And he says, "Stay together. If we stay together, we can win this thing." His courage, his, positive mental outlook, his mental fortitude transmitted to everybody else. Suddenly they were all brave. It was an operational strength. And so the same is true for us. We're not going to be out fighting lions and all that, tigers and all that sort of stuff in a Coliseum per se. But whatever our venue, whatever the arena is in which we are facing adversity, it gives us and those we're working with strength.
I think it's critical to understand that when leaders lose the perspective in adversity, when they lose that positive mental outlook or hope, the consequences to everyone besides themselves can be disastrous. They begin catastrophizing. They overgeneralize temporary problems into permanent defeats. They speak in absolutes. This is a disaster. Nothing's working. We're never going to recover from this. There's no hope. They stop seeing options.
Yeah.
That cognitive narrowing that you think about. Of course, why would your brain need that space to imagine of what's possible if you've already sort of accepted defeat? And they begin to emotionally infect the team with discouragement. Here's the important point with leaders. You don't have to be openly dramatic or openly negative to do permanent damage. I say this all the time. I'm a big teams guy. You cannot lose the locker room. And that goes with culture, but it also goes with attitude. And that is really dictated from the leader. Everyone obviously has a part in it, but the leader many times will dictate the morale, the outlook of the team. A leader who sort of seems chronically defeated will teach others to be the same. A leader who cannot imagine improvement will eventually create a culture that stops trying. I mean, and this has been said through sports teams all the time, like, oh, what about X team? That team has a losing culture. That team is always going to lose. And you'll see that. And what you hear is like, oh, the people that have gone to there and then gone to other places and have had two different experiences and two different successes, it's almost always the culture. And that culture is a reflection of the mental attitude. And again, it's not a Pollyanna. It's not everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. It is, this is our vision. This is our path forward. And this is how we're getting there. And it is amazing how if everyone is saying, there's no way out of this, no way out of this, no way out of this, for one person, especially the leader, to stand up and be like, hey guys, we got this. It's like the movie Gladiator. They're like, oh, we're going out there to be killed. There's 10 people saying that. And one person says up, all right, this is how we're going to get out of this. We're going to do this. Everyone is ready to have that hope. Everyone is ready to have that path forward.
Exactly. The leader's outlook determines the outcome. That's because we function on meaning, not just on information, right? The people that we're leading, they see beyond the words. They see the nonverbal communication. They see our actions. What do we really believe? That's what they're seeing. And so we have to, in a real sense, believe that there's hope. Believe that positive can come out of this adversity. Believe that this team, this group can move forward in the midst of that adversity. If we don't, then the outcome is essentially sealed, I think.
I mean, that goes back to one of my favorite shows, Ted Lasso. It's a sign he's got to, right, believe. And it was obvious that he, as sort of the head coach and honestly his entire coaching team, did believe. During adversity, the team's going to start asking themselves these questions. Is it survivable? Is there a path forward? And if there's not, does my effort matter? Why should I stay committed? Why am I doing this? Is my leader capable of getting us out of this? Like, a positive mental outlook helps answer those questions in a way that keeps the human beings in the team being engaged. Importantly, a constructive outlook does not require certainty. They're not saying this is how this is going to turn out. In fact, some of the most credible leaders are the ones who say something like, I cannot promise that this will be easy. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but this is how we're going to believe. And this is how I believe we're going to get out of this. So we've hit on why it's important, at least from a general standpoint. But what does the science tell us about what a positive mental outlook can do for a team?
Yeah, you're right. We've hit on it a little bit sort of generally, but drilling down on some scientific things, the science here is strong and worth paying attention to. If we look at research on what's called dispositional optimism, it shows that optimism is associated with better coping in the face of adversity. Rather than avoiding problems or disengaging, optimists, and those aren't naive, everything's going to work out fine optimists, but believe that there is a path forward, are more likely to use approach-oriented coping and less likely to rely on the avoidance that I mentioned earlier. So in other words, a more positive outlook tends to move people forward toward challenge rather than away from it. Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build work helps explain why this matters. Positive emotions do not just make people feel better, they can broaden attention, thinking, and behavioral repertoires, which in turn helps build enduring psychological and social resources. Related work by Tugade and Fredrickson found that resilient individuals use positive emotions to bounce back more effectively from stress. So in adversity, then, positivity can help people recover faster and think more flexibly. There's also relevant evidence from the psychological capital literature where hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism are treated as developable sets of capabilities. Studies, in fact, have linked higher psychological capital with better well-being and stronger work-related outcomes, and intervention research also suggests it can be improved rather than viewed as a fixed trait. And that's really important for leaders because it means a constructive outlook is not merely something you either have or do not have, but it's something that you can build intentionally. So put together, the scientific picture is fairly clear. A positive mental outlook is not about self-deception. It's associated with more adaptive coping, broader thinking, greater resilience, and stronger psychological functioning under stress.
I think that's a huge point because I think many of the listeners to our podcast are trying to be better tomorrow than they are today. And I think when a lot of people hear this, they're thinking, well, you either got it or you don't. Like this is like a fixed thing you're born with or you develop during childhood based on how optimistic or cynical your parents were. Like, well, I'm just not an optimist. I don't see things that way. I, always see the lines a little longer and moving a little slower than they are. I don't have that. So I think that's a really important point we'll get to a little later in the podcast of how do we improve on this then. But for leaders, I think it's really important of the science that how you interpret things, how you respond to things is the only thing you're going to be in control of. You're not going to be in control of a lot of times the situation or the circumstances or the things you're tasked for, but how you respond to it is certainly not trivial. Great leaders see adversity, see problems as challenges without surrendering to them. They see times for their teams to really succeed, to really stay engaged. And if you frame those setbacks as a leader, as an opportunity or just another step to go towards your goal, you're setting the tone for the team. And it's not that you're setting it for that one time. You are creating a culture. You're creating a mental outlook for the team for the future. And that is what is so important because many times there's not going to be one adversity. People talk about all the time during sports, like, there's not one point of adversity during a championship season. There are multiple times where teams of greatness had to overcome that. And the teams that are able to do it are usually ones that have already done it. To go through adversity, to have a leader that has said, this is how we're going to go through it and has maintained that positive outlook, creates a team that has that positive mental outlook that comes up on their next challenge and says, hey, we've gone through hard stuff before. We can go through this again. And it all started when that first time they either had two paths. We can be cynical, we can accept defeat, we can just collapse. But because of the team and the leader's positive mental outlook, they said, this is how we're going to attack this. This is the way we're going forward. And they're going to bring that to everything going forward. And that's why I think this is so important. A positive mental outlook helps sustain those behaviors of the leader and the team over time.
Yeah, I think it's a choice. You were saying, some people may be thinking this is either you have it or you don't have it.
Yep.
And I will say there are certain people, and we've talked about this, I've coined this term many years ago of terminal optimism, right? And terminal optimism is Pollyanna, right? Like that's just like, oh, it'll all get better. We don't need to intervene. It will just somehow magically get better. That's not the choice we're talking about.
And it's not believable. Sort of going back to what you mentioned of the others.
Yeah.
The team has to believe there's a way out of it. To ignore the adversity, ignore the situation, does not create a believable, positive mental outlook.
People lose faith in you if you're just blowing smoke. People are smoke detectors. Okay? Most of us have the capability to be a human smoke detector, right? We know when we may lie to ourselves, but we actually know when people are generating smoke, right? And so you can't be that. Here's a mental picture, okay? Imagine two leaders facing the same significant setback, the same adversity. One can say, this is terrible, we're in trouble, I don't know how we're going to fix this. Let's imagine three, actually. We got that guy, right?
We got this guy.
Right. Hey, it's all terrible. no hope.
Well, let's just all sit down.
Okay. Second leader says, hey, this is really bad, but it's just going to get better. Let's just keep doing our thing. It's going to magically get better if we just wait it out. Smoke detection. How is it magically going to get better? The boat is sinking. How is it magically going to get better unless we act differently than we've been acting, right? Then there's the third person. Hey, this is serious. We got to be honest about that. But the reality is we still have capabilities. We still have options. We're going to work this problem step by step. And I believe if we do that, we can get to a good outcome. That's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about the difference between giving up, cynicism, giving up, smoke generation, Pollyanna, and a positive mental outlook that says, this is a bad situation, but we can do something about it and we can affect the outcome. In fact, all three acknowledge that the moment is bad. One of those out of the three preserves the agency of the people. It preserves their hope. And I think at the end of it, that's the difference. The first leader that's amplifying disaster just amplifies that threat, shuts everything down. The second actually paralyzes people in complacency, keeps them from acting to improve the situation because it's just going to magically get better. And so that only accelerates their defeat. Whereas the third organizes a response. And so, in the immediate term and in the long term, that difference changes the entire outcome.
I think that's the point when you were comparing those three that I really got to was all three are acknowledging the situation. This is bad. Only the third one actually addresses it in a meaningful manner.
Right.
And that is the positive mental outlook. It is not everything's going to be fine. It's not that positive mental outlook. It is this is tough. This is an adversity. This is how we're going forward. It comes with a vision. It comes with a vision of this is how we get through this. Like this is a possibility. And like you said, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but this is how I see a possibility of it turning out well for us. And that seems to be the difference in him, is having that positive mental outlook for the team is this is how we move forward. This is our path forward. So we've talked about the what. So we talked about the so what. What does the science say? And now let's get to the hard part. Let's get to the application, because this is where I really think a lot of people are having a tough time seeing the way forward, having a positive mental outlook on positive mental outlook of I thought this is something you were born with. You're either an optimist or you're not. What if I'm a cynic? What if I naturally see the bad in it? The devil's advocate in this. When the pressure's on, when the adversity hits, our leaders, our listeners who want to be better tomorrow than they are today, how do they do it? How do they hone these skills you talked about? I mean, the science already told us these are skills that you can improve. So how do we do it? How do we maintain a positive mental outlook during adversity?
Yeah, I have 7 sort of ideas to help folks with that. But before I do, there's something that's really important that we need to think about as folks are out there listening and thinking about this. When we're faced with adversity, perhaps overwhelming adversity, we need to be honest with ourselves about the situation. And we need to ask ourselves at least 4 questions that I came up with. There could be more, but 4 questions that I think are crucial. And the first is, do I believe in my team? Second is, do I believe in our mission? Is what we're trying to do important? The third is, does my team have the capabilities to successfully overcome this situation? And the final one that I came up with is, do I believe we can actually do it? As a leader, if you ask yourself those 4 things and your answer to any of them is no, then I think you either need to hand over the team to someone who does, or you need to figure out a way how to extricate your team from the situation.
Wow. That's heavy, because it also could answer, is my team capable of this right now? Well, no, but can I get them there? And I guess that's sort of just
that's a modification of that third one. Yeah.
Yeah. Of can I get my team there? Well, we don't have it right now, but if we do, we are capable. I guess we are capable. But those are, they're smoke detectors, right? If you don't believe in those 4 things,
right? Exactly. That's where that comes from.
The team will never. Never.
If they think for an instant that you don't believe across those 4 questions that it's possible, then it becomes impossible because they won't believe it. They won't be able to see it. They won't be able to move toward it, and you're doomed. Right. So I think those are 4 imperative questions to ask before we get to the actual, how do you do this? And so now that we've addressed that, again, I think there are several ways, and I came up with 7, but several ways that leaders can build and maintain a constructive, positive mindset in adversity. The first, tell the truth, but not only the worst part of the truth. Okay? Yeah, this is bad, but there's also this. We have this capability. We have this, opportunity to respond. Leaders lose credibility when they either only talk about the negative, never talk about the positive, or when they minimize reality. And so we could say that either way, positive or negative. But they also do damage when they narrate only danger and loss. Tell the full truth. Here's the problem. Here's what it affects. Here's what we know. Here's what we do not yet know. Here's what remains possible. Here's what we will do next to fix it. That's the honest optimism. That's the honest, positive outlook.
I think that's so huge, because if you don't address it, the human mind will fill in those gaps. Like if you don't address the actual problem and you're like, everything's going to be fine, then the team will start telling their own story because you didn't address it. They know it's a problem. You never said what it affects. Like, all right, we're going to make it off this island. And you didn't say, well, we don't have any water or food and no plan to do it. Then they're like, we're just going to starve. I'm going to whittle away. I mean, I think that's so huge to make that point. That's a really great point.
Yeah. And if you only focus on the bad and you don't say, oh, by the way, there's also these positives, everybody focuses on the bad. They lose sight of the positives. They lose sight of the ability to change it. So yeah, both sides. You got to say the bad and the potential, the positive, the good. So that's number 1. 2, refuse catastrophizing language. This is so important as leaders. Our words matter. It's easy to think we're just one of the folks, right? But they don't see it that way. We can lose sight of the fact that we're in a position where what we say may become the truth. It may become the gospel. It may become the policy, when all we were doing in that moment is just sounding off, just being one of the other people. And we can't do that. Our words matter a great deal. And so as leaders, we got to pay attention to phrases like, this is a disaster. Everything's falling apart. We're done. Nothing's working. There's no good answer. In those moments, we may be expressing ourselves, how we're feeling right then, but that's not how it's interpreted by the people we lead. That steals away from them optimism. It steals away agency. Instead, we've got to modulate how we say things. We might have something in our head that's saying, oh my goodness, this is whatever, but we've got to remember what we say becomes the lens through which the people we're leading see the world. Hey, this is a serious challenge. We've taken a hit. This is going to require an adjustment. We need to move quickly and thoughtfully. This is difficult but workable. Let's identify what's still within our control. That shifting from catastrophizing and expressiveness on our own part to being moderated in a sense, it's not cosmetic. That's really cognitive leadership. We're really helping people to see in a positive frame of mind that this is achievable.
I'm struck by the 2 examples you gave where the catastrophizing language usually ended with a period. This is a disaster, period. Nothing's working, period. There's nothing we can do, period. Where the shift seemed like all of the other ones were balanced thoughts. This is a serious challenge, comma, we need to move quickly and thoughtfully. This is difficult, comma, but workable. All those other ones were so balanced because they addressed it. They identified, this is a problem and this is our path forward. This is what we need to do. It maintained hope and belief, and this is how we're going to move forward. This is our response. This is where our team will go. I agree. That's not a cosmetic shift. That is a completely different mindset.
Number 3, anchor people to what can still be done. In adversity, we need action. Our people, our team need motion. Hopelessness typically grows in a vacuum between bad news and meaningful response. So leaders should quickly answer, what do we do now? What are the next 2 or 3 priorities? What decisions need to be made today? What can each person contribute? Action doesn't eliminate fear, but it reduces paralysis. And that's what we need to do in those immediate moments of adversity. So that's number 3. Number 4, protect perspective. Adversity invites distortion. And as you mentioned, as humans, when we don't have information, we fill it in, usually with a negative.
Yeah.
Why isn't she calling me back? It must be because she doesn't like me. Well, no, maybe she had a car accident, or maybe she won the lottery and she's busy cashing in the check. I don't know, something other than focusing on you, right? So we distort things in those moments. A setback can start to feel like a permanent identity statement, as you were saying with the periods. We are failing. I am failing. This organization is broken. This team is not capable, things like that. We got to resist that drift, because as soon as we start drifting, everybody follows suit. You know, a bad moment, in business world, a bad quarter isn't the whole story. A painful loss is not the end of the mission. Our mistake, even a failure, is not our destiny. It's not who we are. As leaders, we have to maintain that perspective. We have to keep things in proportion.
Mm-hmm.
That proportion keeps adversity from becoming psychological domination and ruining our outlook. So that's the fourth thing. Number 5, borrow from purpose. One of the best ways to maintain a positive outlook is to reconnect to mission. Why are we doing this? Why are we here? Who are we serving? Why does this matter enough that we need to keep going? Purpose doesn't erase a hardship. It doesn't change adversity in a sense, but it puts it in perspective. People can carry a lot when they remember why the burden matters. Number 6, manage your own inputs. Leaders do not maintain constructive outlook by accident. And I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about expressivity versus modulating what you say. You have to pay attention to what is shaping your mind. Who are you listening to? I was talking to my son this morning about this. Who are you listening to? Who is influencing how you're thinking? What memes are you seeing that seem to be funny, but actually are eroding who you are and your character? What are you rehearsing internally? Are you feeding some kind of perspective, or are you feeding panic? Are you talking to people who help you think clearly or make you more cynical? Are you getting enough rest and recovery to remain emotionally regulated? Positive outlook is so much easier to sustain when we're not exhausted, when we're not isolated, we're not mentally flooded with all sorts of nonsense or negativity from different people. So we have to really look at, who are we surrounding ourselves with? What are we allowing ourselves to think about? How's that affecting us? I can tell you, in 2016, I decided to get off of social media and all that, Facebook and whatnot, because I found it made me so angry. So angry. I stopped that foolishness, and my outlook changed so much just because I wasn't exposing myself to all the negativity, polarizing things on either side of the political aisle and all that. Got rid of it, changed my perspective on things. And it can be insidious. So we have to be very cautious about that. We have to be paying attention. What are we allowing ourselves to, be? We're just sitting in this milieu, and it seeps into us. Got to pay attention to that. The 7th thing.
It's interesting. Before you go on, they always say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think for leaders, who you decide to spend your time with, and you touched on this, not only like, what are you reading? What podcasts? Obviously, this one would be amazing. Are you listening to like, what information are you taking in? But also, you're right, the people you're around. If you surround yourself with people who, in the most part, always look at situations negatively, cynically, that is probably going to be part of who you are. So being very intentional with that circle as a leader of like, you know what, I'm going to be around people that when I leave their presence, I feel positive, that don't feel drained, but I feel like they look at problems. You're talking about one easy way to do it. Change who you're around.
Yeah.
That's a huge one.
Yeah. I mean, as you were saying that, the thing that came to my mind is that negativity becomes the language of your relationship. That's how you communicate. Like, this is how we interact. We complain about some political thing or whatever may be going on, right? That's the frame of our relationship. And soon that's just how you're interacting. And that becomes part of what you do. And then it crosses over into a whole other set of things in life. So yeah, I think that's critical. 7th one, last, let people see grounded confidence from you as a leader. Followers do not need a leader who is unrealistically cheerful, or what I, referred to as terminally optimistic. They need a leader who is steady, somebody they can believe in, that they can trust, who's consistent. They need to hear things like, this is hard. I know that, but I believe in this team. I believe we can adapt. I believe we can move through this with integrity and strength. It's that kind of confidence that's contagious.
I think as leaders, and this is one thing that I've had to do recently and in the past, is we have to ask ourselves, when adversity comes at us, how are we going to respond? And to really hone that, I have had to take the thing where I usually and if I'm presented with something where maybe my nature is to react poorly to or to respond negatively, what I've had to do is usually take a few seconds, count to 3. Some people say count to 5, and really process it and sort of let quickly my mental approach be like, okay, well, that's not great. This is how we're going to go forward. Because how you respond to things, how you respond to issues, how you respond to negative comments, whatever the adversity comes, that will dictate way down the line how the team responds. And like you said, words matter, your actions matter. Because of how a leader is, what you say is going to communicate to the team how they should respond, both, with words and without words. There's obviously ways that you can do it. There's ways you can't do it. But as you've said, like, for a leader to maintain that positive mental outlook has such a huge impact, not only on the immediate, but in the future. How is the team going to respond? What is our culture for doing this? And it's not even giving false hope, false belief, but it's maintaining that positive mental outlook of putting the comma in every sentence. This is a really difficult situation, comma. This is how we're going to move forward. Wow, this is going to be really difficult on our team, comma. These are the people that we need to address it. A positive mental outlook does not mean pretending that it's small or doesn't exist. It means refusing to let the adversity become the last thing or the ultimate. And that may be one of the most important things a leader can ever do.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share the episode with those who are passionate about leadership. Till next week, keep leading with character, confidence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.